to the content of this webinar. I'll start with briefly discussing what epidemiology is. Then we'll go through the different study designs. And then I'll address the frequency measures and the measures of association. So what is epidemiology? If you would define it, you would say you study the distribution and the determinants of disease in populations with the goal of controlling disease in the populations. And there's a systematic approach that forms the basis of epidemiology. First, you must decide, like, what is a case. So you must clearly define what a case is. You use, for example, laboratory tests, symptoms, sign, in order to say who has the disease and who doesn't have the disease. Then the next step will be to see how often is the disease occurring. And you can describe patterns, for example, over time, in different places, depending on personal characteristics. And then you can even go a step further, and then you compare the disease frequency between, for example, people with different characteristics, and see what are the reasons that one group of persons with a certain characteristic has more chance of having the disease than another. So you're looking for risk factors. If you just stay with describing the disease frequency, you will call it descriptive epidemiology. If you go the step further and looking for risk factors or causal factors, you can call it analytic epidemiology. Epidemiology in public health can have different tasks. You can use it in public health surveillance. With surveillance, I mean the process that you ongoing, systematically collect information about disease, you analyze it, look at the meaning of it, and disseminate it in order to do something with that information. You can do field investigation just to clarify the circumstances of a case, or a large investigation to characterize how big an epidemic is and to identify what the cause is. Often surveillance and field investigation might be enough to identify causes or the way of transmission and to take appropriate measures to control disease. But sometimes you need analytic studies to really see what is the risk factor for disease. Epidemiologists become more and more important also in evaluation of services or interventions. With linkages, I mean that an epidemiologist hardly works on its own. You often have people who are experts in the disease you're studying. You work together with biostatisticians. There's often a whole team involved in research. And finally, a lot of the research epidemiologists are doing will hopefully later on lead to implementation in the form of policies. And epidemiology becomes also more and more important in the context of health economics. So in the evaluation of healthcare interventions, you often do a cost-effectiveness analysis in a randomized controlled trial, and as input for that, you use disease-specific outcomes, often from the same trial. So for example, referring to my own PhD study, we looked at what is the most effective approach to treat carpal tunnel syndrome, which is a nerve entrapment in the wrist. We looked at direct splinting, first splinting or direct surgery, but we didn't only look at the patient outcomes, we also wanted to look what are the costs related to it, and so what is the most cost-effective approach.